Ever since October 2017, when the New Yorker story about Harvey Weinstein first was published, I and others in the black media have been telling you this guy wasn't going to go to prison. Because you see, when it comes to any sort of scandal that seems to be touching white men, especially white men in positions of power, they always turn it to black men. The first time that sexual harassment was in the public eye as a national issue, they were putting it on a black man, Clarence Thomas. You see, when it comes to crime in general in America, black people, especially black men, are not the face of crime in America, but they can be made into that because black people do not own significant media real estate. The white supremacists do. So whenever they think that they're in danger of actually being held to account, they always use their position to decide, well, we're not talking about us. We're going to go ahead and put this on some black guys. We're going to put this on them and get people to stop talking about us. As Tom Clancy said, the media may not be able to tell people what to think, but it can certainly tell people what to think about. And they have made up their minds. You're not going to be thinking about all of these white men who are getting accused, the mountain of accusations against white sexual predators. Instead, we're going to be looking at the handful of innuendo and rumors and gossip about a couple of black men over here. We're going to try to make sure that that's front page news because we're the ones who control what's on the front page. Now, over 2 years ago, when I and others, just a few others, truth be told, had been telling you Weinstein's not going to prison. That's not how this is going to play out. A lot of you were skeptical, and there were a lot of other people, many of them outside the black community, certainly outside of intelligent black society, who had been believing that, oh, because the white media is making a big deal about this, oh, this Weinstein guy, he's toast, he's going down. I'm sitting here thinking, obviously these idiots have learned nothing from the 2008 economic crash. How many of the men, white men, who crashed the international economy, how many of them wound up behind bars? How many of them? There were hundreds who were involved, so how many of them wound up behind bars? And please don't say Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff was the king of a Ponzi scheme. Steve Mnuchin was. Not only did he go to prison, thank you Kamala Harris, but now he's Treasury Secretary of the United States. Talk about failing upwards. But the point that I'm making is whenever it comes time for white men in positions of power to be held accountable and punished, well, for some dang reason, nothing ever happens to them. They always slip through the net. There's an entire system of trapdoors, escape hatches, and safety nets there to make sure that they never ever get punished. Black men, on the other hand, doesn't matter if you're innocent as the day is long, there's going to be a whole bunch of roadblocks, a whole bunch of stumbling blocks, and a whole bunch of pitfalls there to snare you. And that brings us to the now conclusion of the Weinstein trial, and we know how this one's going to go. We've been telling you for over 2 years how this is going to go. All of it's been nothing more than a stage-managed bit of judicial theater. The Weinstein case goes to the jury tomorrow, but the jury is not the one who decides this. As I was telling you in that book, When Corruption Was King, as Robert Cooley said, the old lawyer's adage is far more important to know the judge than it is to know the law. 5 years ago, Harvey Weinstein was facing this exact same scenario, but his pal Cy Vance was there to make sure that the case died a natural death. And as you can see, Cy Vance ain't exactly been given this one the old college try. He was deliberately deciding to pull his punches because the decision had been made Harvey Weinstein's not going to go to prison. It's been arranged. And so now at long last, when we've been telling you what you thought was not going to happen, you figured, oh, because of all of the critical ink, notice the wording I'm getting, I didn't say negative, I said critical, all of the critical stories about Harvey Weinstein and his sexual predation, you thought the white media would not dare to go against Me Too and Time's Up. And I've been telling you for 2 years, look at who it is who put the money into Time's Up. It's the media companies. It's the talent agencies. And it's also certain individuals who themselves, their names have been linked, long linked to rumors of sexual impropriety. So it should not surprise you that here we are on the cusp of the Weinstein verdict. The jury's about to deliberate and decide his fate, and the white media is already telegraphing to you to expect an acquittal. You see, 2 years after the black media had been telling you how this was going to happen, now the white media figures it's time to do what they were doing with all those cops who had been killing black people, and the fix was in. You got to make sure that before you hand down these shocking, unbelievable verdicts, since it's all been arranged, but before you go ahead and drop this bomb on the public, well, you got to prepare them first. You should prepare for a verdict that is anything but justice. You should prepare for it. Don't do anything about it. You better not disagree with it, but just expect it. Now, with the stories that are out there so far in the last 24 hours, currently there's 3 big white media outlets who are pushing the line the hardest that Weinstein's going to walk: Fox Business Channel, the New York Post, and the Wall Street Journal. And of course, I think we all can agree that it's absolutely no coincidence whatsoever that those 3 in particular, the Fox Business Channel, New York Post, and the Wall Street Journal, all 3 of those outlets are owned by the exact same person, Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch owns all 3 of them. So he has the ability to have these big, very influential, widespread white media outlets put out the exact same story. You're not getting 3 points of view when you look at Fox Business Channel or Wall Street Journal and the New York Post. You're getting one viewpoint, Rupert Murdoch's, being pushed at you by 3 of his sock puppet flunky entities, 3 subsidiaries of News Corp. So you got 3 different alleged different voices all saying the exact same thing. Now, as Dr. John Henry Clark taught you, the reason this is going on is because somebody wants this out there. And notice how the rest of the white media is not coming down on Fox Business Channel or the New York Post or the Wall Street Journal and saying, how dare you guys imply that this admitted sexual predator is going to get off the hook? What are you wanting him to? Oh yeah, it's almost as if the white media is giving their silent complicity, because that's what it is. Silence equals assent. Rupert Murdoch also owns Fox News, which had to pay out over $145 million to settle lawsuits against Bill O'Reilly and Roger Ailes, who was the head of Fox News, as well as other Fox News executives. So, of course, you better believe that the house that Rupert Murdoch built has a huge vested interest in promoting the idea that when white men are accused of sexual assault and predation, the public really ought to let them off the hook. This has all been part of the plan. Every time it came time to talk about Harvey Weinstein's latest courtroom news, all of a sudden HBO puts out a special against Michael Jackson, a pack of lies against him, so we can talk about something else. Comes time to talk about Harvey Weinstein some more. Here comes Lifetime with not 1 but 2 docu-series, which are anything but docu-series. They're mockumentaries at best. Just a whole bunch of accusations, not anything that actually resembles true evidence, but the only thing that's true is that these females said it. That much is true. But just a steady drumbeat. We're not talking about Matt Lauer. Instead, we're talking about Tavis Smiley. Every time it came time to talk about Weinstein, the white media uses their monopoly to change the subject, or at least try to raise up some sort of white noise. And now you see why. For the last 2+ years, we haven't really been going in on Harvey Weinstein because the white media has deliberately decided that they would not report on it. And if somebody brought it up, well, we're going to talk about some black man, but we're not talking about Harvey Weinstein. Rupert Murdoch's publishing empire are merely the most vocal cheerleaders for Weinstein. The rest of the white media is being real muted in their criticism or condemnation of him. And that's by design. None of them are licking their chops in anticipation of a Weinstein guilty verdict. Notice that? Nobody's doing any stories about what's going to happen after Weinstein goes to prison. What kind of prison do you think he's going to? How hard a sentence do you think he's going to get? They're not doing that because to do that is to raise the public's expectation that he's supposed to get punished. To do that would be to feed the public's desire and expectation and anticipation that a guilty verdict's coming and he should not get off the hook. So instead, the white media is not talking about what kind of punishment do you expect him to get. The white media understands precisely what the mass psychology of a group is. They understand exactly how group psychology works. How do you feed and raise and elevate a particular set of expectations among a group, and how do you suppress a particular set of expectations? You talk about what kind of punishment Weinstein gets, you're creating a presupposition that he's going to be punished. And hence, you're also setting the stage for outrage if he is not. On the other hand, if you decide to let Rupert Murdoch's propaganda mills put out there, don't expect this guy to go to prison. I don't know what you're expecting, but I can tell you what not to expect. Don't expect him to go to prison. And the white media does not push back and nobody says anything to the contrary. Now you're creating the presupposition that, well, this white guy with money should walk. Let me tell you something. This ain't about money. Bill Cosby's got money and he's sitting in prison right now. So I've had some fools who've been trying to push that line. Bill Cosby, he ain't got as much money as Weinstein, though. Brock Turner doesn't have as much money as Weinstein, and yet Brock Turner didn't spend a day in jail. Kevin Spacey doesn't have as much money as Weinstein. What happened to him? You see, there are some folks who are stuck on stupid. You have a whole bunch of you have a bunch of lead pipe babies, bunch of crack babies out there who are letting their Twitter fingers run wild. These people, they're the same ones who have been saying, probably believe that Weinstein had a snowball's chance in hell of going to prison. The question here is not a question of money. It is a question of color. That's how the system works. That's how the system operates. If you're black, your money doesn't protect you. The white media is not interested in R. Kelly because he's a famous black man. They're interested in him because he's black. That's the first thing that draws their interest. Or have you missed the fact that whenever you turn on the nightly news, they don't care about how many white people shoot folks. They don't care about how many white people engage in running of drugs, meth, child molestation, but they are concerned about some black person who is accused of sticking up a liquor store. And that will always lead the nightly news because it's not about the crime, it's about the color of the accused. This is social engineering to force the public to accept that if the accused happens to be a white man, particularly a white man who happens to be in media, then no amount of evidence is going to be sufficient to put him in prison. That's what's happening here. Social programming. As human beings, we're creatures of habit and creatures of repetition. And as we all know, repetition is the mother of learning. If you keep seeing white sexual predators who everyone knows are guilty of sin walk out of court free time after time after time, then the public becomes conditioned to accept that outcome. You can desensitize the public to practically any condition. Let them keep seeing that a certain demographic is expected to walk out of court, and the public will be outraged the first time that it happens, and then almost immediately they will just accept that as well. I guess that's just how it is. We have a not so quiet conspiracy of silence. We happen to have an unspoken agreement between the white media and the dominant society. They understand exactly why the white media is obsessed with reporting on every feeble rumor regarding a black man, no matter how clearly false they may be. The dominant society understands completely that this is about changing the headline. And truth be told, they don't have to be forced to accept the narrative that the white media is pushing because they already want it. But they also know that the more black people point out the double standard, the harder it becomes to continue the lie. And that's the reason why they have to keep up a constant cacophony. They have to keep having headlines coming in an endless stream. They're at a very delicate point right now, and by they, I mean the white media. The propaganda arm of white supremacy is under threat. They need to keep the heat on black men and off of themselves. If the attention does turn toward the media, then it will lead to greater oversight, but worse than that, it will erode the white media's standing even more than it's already been eroded. On some level, a propaganda outlet has to have a certain amount of support, and if the propaganda mill happens to be engaging in all sorts of criminality, well, even the public that benefits from it's going to be looking and going, man, these guys are a bunch of crooks. It's not important that the white media be virtuous, but it is crucial that they appear to be virtuous. This is what Niccolo Machiavelli instructed in his classic treatise, The Prince. He said it is not important that you actually be a virtuous man, but it is crucial that you appear to be virtuous. And what is true for the individual is also true for an institution. That's how this game works. As an institution, the white media does not have to be virtuous. Everybody pretty much understands that. But the thing is, they do, to a certain extent, have to be able to credibly present themselves as having some appreciable level of virtue. At the very least, what they cannot be is a place that is run through and overflowing with a whole bunch of rapists and sexual predators and perverts and deviants. That they can't have. Just like an actor, it's not important that you actually be what you portray yourself as, but you got to be convincing. And you can't be too convincing when you got Mo Lester Moonves and Matt Lauer, who are admitting to having preyed sexually on all women in the most grotesque of ways. A propaganda outlet knows that it's never a good thing when they are the story. The white media's brand is that they are an authority, and exposing their perpetual sexual predation destroys their credibility. It destroys their standing in the public eye. It becomes an elephant in the room. So this is potentially an existential crisis that the white media is facing. When Matt Lauer or a Mo Lester Moonves gets exposed, that damages the brand that this or that white media has. But when this behavior is shown to be epidemic across the board for all white media outlets, well, that destroys and undermines the white media itself. So they need a glittering distraction. And since time immemorial, the old standby, the golden blackjack that never misses, the classic distraction du jour, the big bad black man. Everyone knows that it's more or less a lie, but what they also know is that beating up on black men is a guilty pleasure that never gets old. You see, the vast majority of Americans do not know who Mo Lester Moonves is, at least not without some help. But everybody knows who Bill Cosby is. And that being the case, the bigger and more prominent the black target, the better. Why did Harvey Weinstein, through his lawyer, give Cy Vance, the same DA who is allegedly prosecuting him right now, why did Weinstein's lawyer give Cy Vance $10,000 5 years ago? Well, the reason Weinstein had that done is because, as I keep telling you, the white supremacists understand that when it comes to their freedom, some things are simply too important to be left to chance. The women who we see, mostly aging actresses whose looks have faded and whose hotness has long since passed its sell-by date, they're still talking, but their rhetoric has an undeniable air of resignation to it. It's the same empty platitudes that come from someone who's been reduced to that most pathetic of all consolation prizes, the moral victory. That's usually psychological comfort food for losers. You see, while Harvey Weinstein is undeniably a sexual predator, it's also undeniable that his reputation preceded him too. Too many of his accusers had every opportunity to get out, but instead they chose to put out. And that's not to say that Harvey Weinstein shouldn't go to prison. If Bill Cosby deserves to be in jail because of largely dubious accusations, then it's inexcusable that the proven claims against Weinstein do not put that pervert under the jail. If Bill Cosby deserves to be in prison for even a single day, Harvey Weinstein deserves to spend the rest of his unnatural-born existence inside a cage. But of course, we all understand that's not what any of this was ever about. This entire quasi-judicial exercise that's been going on revolving around Harvey Weinstein, it's actually been, basically it's been a judicial immunity play that's been playing itself out. This has been nothing more than a media judicial operation meant to contain the threat of holding white men accused of a crime accountable, especially the crime of sexual predation. Kevin Spacey was just the thin end of the wedge. And since they control the media, which tells people what and who to think about, and they control the courts and the DA's offices, which administrate the injustice system, it is all too easy for them to orchestrate a bit of legal theater, a prearranged drama whose conclusion is to see the criminal go free. When the accused happens to be a white individual, particularly one who runs a media company, crime does pay, and it pays big. And since the dominant society is largely complicit and sympathetic to this sham because they believe this immunity also applies to them, which it does occasionally, they'll play right along. And when the media begins beating the drum about R. Kelly or tries to dig up the corpse of Rick James, that same dominant society will nod their heads in agreement because they understand that the same racial double standard that Harvey Weinstein and all the other white media moguls depend upon for their legal immunity, that's also the exact same racial double standard that Brock Turner depends on, and that Darren Wilson depends on, and that the alt-right thugs in Charlottesville depend on. It's not a conspiracy when the majority of the society is in on it. It's just the social order. And no matter what 50 Cent or certain Hollywood actresses may try to tell you, this system isn't our system. It's their system. And by they, I mean the criminals. So it's stupid to say the system is broken or we have to fix our system. You can tell that the system isn't broken at all by how consistently it works to lock up certain people and how consistently it allows others to go scot-free. The fact that we were able to accurately predict exactly how these events would play out years beforehand, that lets you know that it's all a con. The system isn't broken. It's not out of control. It is firmly under control of the white supremacists. How many Wall Street bankers who crashed the financial markets are in prison? How many of the white media moguls and white media personalities who have admitted to sexual assault and harassment and worse, how many of them have been charged, to say nothing of being put on trial? Jussie Smollett is on trial. Matt Lauer is not. Lifetime has made 2 mini-series about R. Kelly, but they haven't made so much as a 10-minute infomercial about Mo Lester Moonves. No, the system is not broken at all. It's working exactly the way it's designed to. As I've been telling you for over a decade, the laws weren't written to punish them. They were written to punish you. So as you see, you can understand how the white media operates. The black media has been trying to educate you about that. You understand that they have their script, they're playing it out, and it's a matter of they don't have any fear of any sort of social backlash because most of the society happens to be on board with the lie, but also because of the fact that the white media knows how to play these rubes. The bad guys know exactly the con game that they're pulling. And we need for you to know it too. The white media is not going to be trying to find ways to tear down the very individuals who benefit from the system. The individuals who benefit from it are the ones running it. They're not trying to dismantle white supremacy. Only black people are silly enough to try to undermine our own power. White supremacy is not so stupid. And it's not even a matter of you thinking to yourself that if there can just be some sort of scandal put on someone, white supremacy is scandal proof to a large degree. You think that just because there's a few unflattering headlines about somebody, what that also means is that the system's going to treat them the same way it treats you. See, all it takes is a black person. All it takes is an accusation to put you in prison. Because that's how the system is structured. It's structured so that it's easy. Just one accusation, even a whiff of scandal would put you in prison. It would get you into a bind that you can't get out of. But it doesn't work that way for them. And this is also about reinforcing the fact that just because you got some white women who may go off code, some actresses who got a little bit too long in the tooth, whose looks have faded and their prospects as well, and now they're trying to cash out to the best of their ability. What's happening is you got a whole bunch of white men in positions of power who are letting their women know, you're not going to make this into a habit. This ain't going to become habit forming. They're asserting themselves. And they're also making it clear that the only men who are actually going to be doing prison time are going to be the black ones. Yes, it is going to be unpopular with a certain segment, but you know what? The white feminists have proven, if nothing else, they've proven that as soon as the white men in power put their foot down, they've proven that the feminists will back down. These white feminists, time and again, is a time-honored tradition among them, that as soon as her man lets her know that she's talking a little bit too much or that she's getting a little bit out of pocket, she knows that it's time for her to go ahead and bite her lip, and it's time for her to sit on her hands. She understands that. She knows when she's gone a little bit too far. That white feminist understands that the white man who controls things, he will humor her disobedience to a truth, but not to a fault. And he's the one who decides where that line is at, not her. So, you can go ahead and get out your watches, family. I mean, for those of you who actually thought that the white media was somehow cheerleading for Weinstein to go to prison, or that the fact that he got some unflattering stories, I mean, the white media can turn that off on a dime. And they will be shameless about it. You'll be sitting there howling for blood, and the white media will immediately get in your face and tell you why you're wrong and why you shouldn't be demanding any punishment for this guy, just because there are dozens of women, if not hundreds of women, who have accused him of wrongdoing. That's no reason for you to think that he should go to prison. But the law, well, the law is not based on words on a page. It's based on skin color and nothing else. That is the totality of the law. Some of you had doubts about that. And now the white media is disabusing you of those doubts. The same white media that was putting out all those headlines about Weinstein are now the ones saying, and don't expect him to go to jail now. And when this is over, Tarana Burke is not going to be saying, maybe I should have said something. She won't be saying anything at all. Tarana Burke is a tool of white supremacy. No different than a Rose McGowan. No different than a Mark Lamont, you big dummy Hill. Don't expect to be seeing these guys leading the charge and saying, you know, it's wrong that Weinstein didn't go to prison now. Y'all know y'all wrong that he can go to prison. Instead, what they'll be saying is, well, it's our system. Our system ain't perfect, but it's the only system we got. Expect for them to pull out that old saw. Well, that may not have been the outcome we were hoping for, but you know, that's an issue of class. It ain't an issue of race. Why, most of Weinstein's accusers were white women, so it ain't an issue of race. Never mind the fact that Weinstein himself is white, but they'll be claiming that that's not an issue of race. You know, Weinstein had some black accusers too. Not that you would know it listening to Gayle King or Oprah Winfrey or Tarana Burke. But Weinstein also had some black women who accused him of violating them as well. See, the only difference between Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein, both of them had majority white accusers with a couple of black ones on the side, mostly for optics in Cosby's case. But the only difference between them is skin color. And that was enough. So go ahead and get out your stopwatches. You can go ahead and count the minutes until the jury comes back with the shocking, surprising verdict. But the white media is not going to be treating it as an outrage. When the verdict gets handed down and Weinstein is allowed to walk out free, two things are going to occur. First of all, the white media is going to begin doing just a barrage of white splaining. You're going to have a whole bunch of white legal experts giving a tisk, just making a perfunctory and brief show of, that wasn't the outcome that we were expecting. But you know what? When you look at the facts, though, they ain't going to be talking about the law. They're going to be talking about the facts. Well, when you look at the facts, though, of the accusation, what you see is, well, really, what Weinstein did really wasn't as bad as all that. Well, you know, the prosecution just did. The case was too weak, you see. It was just too weak, you see. Well, you know, at the end of the day, people looked and as far as the jury was concerned, these are just the games that people play in Hollywood. And well, you know, if you should have walked away from the casting couch, you know, the exact same defenses that were given for Bill Cosby, that, hey, Weinstein was contacting the accuser long after she claims that he had assaulted her. all of a sudden that's going to be sufficient. That's going to be a good enough explanation. Well, you see, if she didn't have a problem with him contacting her after the alleged assault, well, that just undermined her credibility. And that's the reason why, she undermined her own credibility. You see, that's going to be good enough for Weinstein, but it wasn't good enough for Bill Cosby, though. But don't expect the white media to bring up that. They're not going to be bringing up and saying, hey, there's a bunch of similarities between the case that got brought against Cosby. Gee, wonder why it is that Cosby got sent to prison and Weinstein's being let go. So that's the first thing that's going to happen. The white media is going to begin white-splaining to beat the band. And the second thing that's going to happen is you've had some of those DAs who have been claiming that they're going to be bringing cases against Weinstein. What they're actually doing is they're burying the cases. The fix is in. What's going to happen is they're going to start giving plea deals to Weinstein. What they're going to be claiming is, well, after what happened in New York, we judged that the case was simply too weak. At the end of the day, Weinstein, he's a slippery little eel. He's a slick little pervert. And well, we judged that if the prosecution couldn't get him in New York, we figured we didn't have a chance. That's how the white media is going to white-splain all this away. That so-called charges in Los Angeles, those are going to get buried. Those are going to be dismissed, and they're going to use what's happened in New York as the justification for it. That's how you know that these guys are working hand in hand. That's how you know a program is at work here. The white media is not going to tell you all that. They're going to leave you with the false hope that maybe they will use their system to punish each other. They're going to leave you with that idiotic delusion. Only the black media is going to let you know what happens before it occurs, because truth be told, you can't be listening to these fools who do not have any foresight. A media is absolutely worthless if they cannot tell you what's going to occur before it happens. You need to be the first to know, no matter how unpopular or, from your limited point of view, how unlikely the outcome may be. As the black media, it is not our job to give you what is the most pleasant news. We give you the information that you need in order to keep your power, in order to keep your freaking lives. We do not repeat what the white media says. We tell you the truth that the white media isn't going to give you. So go ahead and let this outrage that's coming, you're going to be outraged by it. The white media won't. So when they go ahead and let this verdict come down, don't you dare act surprised by it. And as for those people who have been claiming that, we think that something's going to happen to Weinstein, don't forget, they're not going to be too outraged either. I'm going to have some special comments after the verdict is officially handed down, but the point is, we've been telling you this for the last couple of years. We didn't have a crystal ball that we peered into. It's a matter of we know the society that we live in. The society has no problem. I mean, for God's sake, every time that some white supremacist murdered a black person, it was an outrage when Emmett Till's killers didn't go to prison. It was an outrage when Medgar Evers' killer didn't go to prison. It was an outrage when the murder of Fred Hampton went unanswered. Everybody knew that Fred Hampton had been murdered in his sleep. These were outrages, but they were also outrages that went unpunished. It's not as if the public was sitting there going, we're with the police. No, they were outrages back then too. And the white media dismissed and white-splained every single one of them. The times may change, but the lies and the liars remain the same. Take this as an object lesson. The white media is not here for the sake of news coverage. They are here for the sake of a news cover-up. Only the black media will expose the lies. Only the black media will bring you the truth. If you consider yourself to be intelligent black society, then you can't afford to be the last one to know. But there's only one entity that's actually going to tell you what happens before it occurs. So when everybody else is being all shocked and surprised, don't be too harsh on them. Many of them think that the white media is their friend. They have a whole bunch of false expectations that the white media has given them. They seem to think if the white media happens to criticize someone, or if the white media happens to run some unflattering headlines, that means the white media is teeing them up to be punished. And no matter how many times it fails to happen, they will still hold on to that pathetic hope. You just take a look at just how sophisticated this was. Because there's a whole bunch of slow coasts out there and half-wits who, whenever you mention that white supremacy is the most sophisticated system the world's ever seen, they go, it ain't sophisticated. These are the same idiots who will tell you that I don't say white supremacy because white ain't supreme to nothing. Well, actually it is because of the fact they're in charge. I know they're in charge because you damn sure aren't. We cannot keep telling ourselves feel-good lies. We got to be honest about the world that we're in. We got to be honest about the circumstances that we face so we can change those circumstances. You are not up against a weak enemy. You're up against a strong enemy. You are not up against an enemy who is disorganized. Your enemy is highly organized. You are not up against some enemy who's making it up as he goes. He has a sophisticated system in place. He has contingencies on top of contingencies. You don't keep a system like this going for 500 plus years without knowing exactly what you're doing. He's had tons of practice in Europe before he decided to take his show on the road. That's the reason why you got so many black folks. If white supremacy is not sophisticated, then black people must be the dumbest people on the face of the earth because we fall for a system that's so pig simple stupid. No, white supremacy is quite sophisticated. It's the people who deny it who are the idiots. They're the fools. They're the ones who are as simple as the day is long. Harvey Weinstein knew exactly what the outcome of this was going to be, as did the white media. You better go ahead and take mental notes about how this thing unfolded and how the white media acted as a group to pull this off. This was about social engineering writ large. What, you think that Les Moonves, before he was taken down, you think he wasn't talking with Weinstein and saying exactly how to play this one? Even after he got removed, you still don't see CBS going in on Les Moonves or Harvey Weinstein. Yeah, but they were very concerned about R. Kelly now, weren't they, at CBS? For those of you who might have been somewhat skeptical, hopefully the message has gotten through now. When I tell you that the white media is the official mouthpiece for established white power, now that you've seen what they've done to let the most notorious sexual predator in the country to help make sure that they engineer an acquittal or hung jury, something to make sure this guy doesn't go to prison. Now that you've seen the lengths that they're willing to go to for a man who everyone agrees is guilty as sin, you also understand that this is how they program the society. Maybe now when somebody tells you that these guys are shameless and ruthless, hopefully next time somebody tells you that, it won't take 2 years and a judicial outrage for you to believe it.